Emily and David Carter seemed like grieving parents desperate to find their missing baby, but as investigators dug deeper, shocking secrets unraveled, revealing that the couple who once begged for answers might have been hiding the darkest truth of all. The town of Greenfield was the kind of place where people left their doors unlocked at night and waved to each other while passing on the quiet streets. Life moved at a steady pace, and crime was something most only heard about on the evening news. That sense of security was shattered when the story of 3-month-old Lily Carter spread across the community. On a chilly October morning, Emily and David Carter reported that their infant daughter had gone missing from her crib sometime during the night. According to them, they had put her to bed as usual, kissed her goodnight, and gone to sleep in the next room. By sunrise, Lily's crib was empty, her blanket folded neatly at the end as if nothing had happened. Panic set in, and the police were called immediately. When officers arrived, they found the Carter home quiet, almost too orderly. There were no broken windows, no signs of forced entry, and nothing inside the house appeared disturbed. Emily sat on the couch, clutching Lily's favorite stuffed rabbit, trembling with tears running down her face. David remained standing near the front door, speaking in clipped sentences, answering questions but avoiding eye contact. The scene was unsettling, not because of what was visible, but because of what was missing. A baby had vanished without a trace, and the clues simply weren't there. Within hours, the news spread across Greenfield, and the entire community reacted with shock and urgency. Volunteers flooded the streets to help search. Flyers with Lily's picture were printed and taped to lampposts, shop windows, and community boards. Search teams combed through wooded areas, fields, and even ditches along the highways. Drones hovered over the forests, while police dogs were brought in to pick up a scent. Despite all the resources thrown into the search, no trace of Lily was found. The baby seemed to have disappeared into thin air, leaving behind only unanswered questions. The town rallied around the Carters at first, believing them to be devastated parents in need of support. Vigils were held outside their home, with neighbors lighting candles and leaving flowers at the front steps. Emily appeared fragile and heartbroken in front of the cameras, begging for her daughter's safe return. David stood beside her, silent and stoic, his arms crossed tightly as if holding in emotions he could not express. To many, they appeared to be grieving in their own ways, but to investigators, subtle details began raising quiet doubts. Detectives could not ignore the absence of forced entry or any signs of struggle. Kidnappings in Greenfield were unheard of, and the idea of a stranger slipping in and out undetected seemed unlikely. The more they examined the scene, the more uneasy they became. Why had the blanket been neatly folded instead of thrown aside by a frantic intruder? Why did the parents' statements about the night's events differ slightly each time they were asked? These questions lingered in the minds of those assigned to the case. As night fell on the first day of the search, the people of Greenfield lit candles again, whispering prayers into the cold October air. The town's trust in safety and family was beginning to crack, though no one could yet imagine just how dark the truth behind Lily's disappearance would turn out to be. At first, the disappearance of Lily Carter united the town in a wave of sympathy. Neighbors dropped off meals at the Carter home, while church groups organized prayer circles. The front lawn became a gathering place for strangers who wanted to show support. Journalists set up cameras across the street, broadcasting updates as Emily, wrapped in a long coat, sometimes stepped outside with swollen eyes. She clutched a framed photo of Lily, whispering about her desperate hope that someone would bring her baby back. David, by contrast, stayed quiet, his jaw tight as he stood behind her, arms folded, speaking rarely during the press conferences. To many watching, it seemed like a portrait of two grieving parents coping in different ways. But to the investigators observing closely, small cracks in their story began to appear. Detectives interviewed the Carters separately, and the inconsistencies were immediate. Emily insisted she had checked on Lily at midnight before going to bed, describing how her daughter had been sound asleep. Yet David claimed it had been closer to 2 in the morning when Emily finally laid down. Their accounts of the back door also didn't match. Emily swore it had been locked before they went to bed, but David said he wasn't sure and thought he might have left it unlocked by accident. These might have been simple lapses in memory, but in a case where every minute mattered, the details carried weight. Detectives noted the discrepancies and kept pressing. The search around Greenfield grew larger. Police scoured nearby rivers, abandoned barns, and rural roadsides, while helicopters hovered overhead. Despite the scale of the search, nothing useful was discovered. No footprints in the yard, no tire marks on the driveway, and no reports of suspicious vehicles passing through the neighborhood. Everything about the supposed kidnapping seemed strangely clean, as if whoever had taken Lily had vanished without leaving a single trace. Detectives found it increasingly difficult to believe a stranger had managed such a flawless disappearance in a matter of hours. A breakthrough came when investigators requested footage from a neighbor's security camera. The device was angled toward the street and captured activity near the Carter home in the early hours of the morning. At first, nothing seemed unusual, just empty streets and the occasional passing car. But around 3 a.m., the grainy video showed a lone figure moving quickly down the side of the road, carrying what looked like a large bundle in their arms. The figure disappeared into the direction of the woods behind the Carter property, never re-emerging on the camera. The footage raised immediate suspicions. The timestamp matched the hours the Carters were believed to be home asleep. If a stranger had taken Lily, why had no one seen or heard them? And if the figure was someone from the Carter household, why would they be walking into the woods with something in their arms at such an hour? Investigators kept the footage quiet, sharing it only within the team, while they deepened their examination of Emily and David's backgrounds. Behind the scenes, public sympathy was slowly giving way to whispers of doubt. Online forums began picking apart the parents' appearances in interviews, analyzing Emily's trembling voice and David's cold demeanor. What had begun as a story of a grieving family was shifting into something darker. While the community still prayed for Lily's safe return, the detectives working the case were already starting to consider a chilling possibility: that the mystery did not begin with a stranger's intrusion, but within the Carter home itself. Detectives knew they had to look deeper into the lives of Emily and David Carter. Outwardly, they presented themselves as a young couple building a family, but interviews with friends and relatives painted a very different picture. Emily had confided to a close friend that she felt overwhelmed by the demands of motherhood. Sleepless nights and constant stress had left her drained, and she sometimes hinted that she longed for her old life of freedom. David, on the other hand, was carrying the burden of mounting debt. Their mortgage was overdue, credit card bills piled on the kitchen counter, and the pressure was crushing him. The cracks in their marriage were widening, and detectives began to wonder if Lily's disappearance was somehow connected to those struggles. The financial records uncovered a troubling detail. Just weeks before Lily went missing, David had taken out a life insurance policy on her. Though the amount was not large, it was unusual enough to draw suspicion. Investigators started considering the possibility that money might have been a motive. At the same time, forensic experts combed through the Carter home once again, this time with more advanced equipment. What they found changed the course of the investigation. Under the soft fibers of the nursery carpet, faint traces of blood were detected. It wasn't visible to the naked eye, but under special lights, the patterns revealed areas that had been cleaned. Swabs confirmed it belonged to Lily. This discovery shook the investigative team. Until then, the case had been treated as a kidnapping, but now there was evidence that Lily had been injured, or worse, inside her own home. The parents' account of the night became even harder to trust. If Lily had been harmed in the nursery, how could a stranger be responsible? Detectives quietly began shifting the focus of their investigation from abduction to homicide. Friends and neighbors noticed changes in Emily and David as well. At vigils, Emily appeared more frantic, her hands trembling as she clutched candles. But some remarked that her grief seemed rehearsed. almost like a performance for the cameras. David, meanwhile, grew more detached. Instead of expressing sorrow, he often avoided eye contact, giving short responses and showing little outward emotion. While these observations alone proved nothing, they added to the growing unease surrounding the couple. The media quickly picked up on the doubts. Headlines began to ask questions instead of offering sympathy. Reporters pointed out inconsistencies in the parents' statements, and television pundits debated whether the Carters knew more than they were saying. The once supportive community began to feel uneasy, with whispers spreading about the possibility that Lily had not been taken by a stranger at all. As detectives pieced together the fragments of evidence, the insurance policy, the cleaned carpet, the odd behavior of the parents, they started forming a chilling theory. Lily might never have left the house alive, and the mysterious figure caught on camera carrying a bundle into the woods could have been the final step in concealing the truth. The case was no longer just about finding a missing child. It had transformed into uncovering a dark secret hidden by those who were supposed to protect her. The breakthrough investigators had been waiting for came from an unexpected source. A local hiker, familiar with the wooded trails behind the Carter property, contacted police after stumbling upon something unsettling. Beneath a pile of leaves and half buried under loose soil lay a small, faded blanket. It was stained with dark blotches that looked alarmingly like blood. The hiker, shaken, led detectives to the spot, and within hours the area was sealed off as a crime scene. Forensic teams carefully collected the blanket and began combing through the surrounding woods for more evidence. What they found soon after confirmed the darkest fears of everyone involved in the case. Hidden beneath a shallow layer of earth and rocks was a small grave. Inside it were the fragile remains of Lily Carter, wrapped tightly in another blanket identical to one missing from her nursery. The discovery turned the investigation upside down. What had begun as a search for a missing child was now officially a murder case. DNA analysis confirmed the blood on the blanket belonged to Lily, and soil samples taken from the Carter backyard matched the dirt found on the blanket, suggesting it had been carried directly from the home. The shallow grave was located less than a mile from the Carter residence, in an area accessible only by foot, which made the neighbors' surveillance footage even more crucial. Investigators re-examined the video and compared the figure walking into the woods with David's physical build. Forensic video experts noted similarities in height, posture, and gait, strengthening the theory that it was David who had been carrying the bundle. As the evidence mounted, detectives turned their attention back to Emily. Her role in the case became a central question. She had claimed she slept through the night, yet her statements about the timing of events continued to shift slightly each time she was interviewed. She denied knowing anything about the figure on the surveillance video, but her vague answers raised suspicion. Investigators began to suspect that Emily had not only been aware of what happened, but may have helped in the cover-up. The town of Greenfield reacted with horror as news of the discovery spread. Vigils turned into gatherings of grief and anger. Neighbors who once stood shoulder to shoulder supporting the Carters now whispered about betrayal. To learn that the tiny baby everyone had prayed for had been found lifeless in the woods was almost too much for the community to bear. Media trucks lined the street in front of the Carter home, capturing images of detectives carrying evidence bags out of the house. The once quiet family residence was now the center of a chilling crime scene. Prosecutors prepared their case, knowing they now had more than circumstantial evidence. Between the forensic traces in the nursery, the insurance policy, the neighbor's footage, and now the discovery of the body, the pieces of the puzzle were fitting together in a grim picture. For investigators, the tragedy was no longer about finding Lily alive, but about proving beyond doubt that the people entrusted to love and protect her had instead orchestrated her death. Emily and David Carter were taken into custody on a gray morning, the street outside their home crowded with reporters and stunned neighbors. The sight of the couple being led out in handcuffs sent shockwaves through the town. Cameras captured every moment, from Emily's tear-streaked face to David's stiff and silent posture. For weeks, the community had prayed for their baby's safe return, never imagining that the parents themselves would be accused of her death. The charges were announced later that day: first-degree murder, evidence tampering, and obstruction of justice. It was a turning point, not just in the case, but in the way the entire town of Greenfield viewed the people they once pitied. As the investigation details were released to the public, the story grew darker. Prosecutors revealed that financial strain and personal conflict had driven the couple to a breaking point. Emily had struggled with the overwhelming demands of caring for an infant, and David had been consumed by mounting debt. The life insurance policy taken out in Lily's name, though small, was presented as evidence of premeditation. The jury would be told that the Carters staged the disappearance to mislead authorities and buy themselves time. The cleaned carpet, the surveillance footage, and the shallow grave were described as undeniable proof that Lily's death had been concealed rather than mourned. The trial became a national spectacle, broadcast in clips across news stations and dissected by commentators. Inside the courtroom, prosecutors painted a picture of two parents who had betrayed their most basic responsibility. They described the night Lily disappeared, suggesting that an argument had escalated and that the baby's cries became the catalyst for a fatal act. While no one outside the couple could know the exact moment Lily's life was taken, the evidence suggested it had happened inside the nursery where faint traces of her blood were found. The defense argued that there was no clear proof of intent, framing the tragedy as an accident followed by a panicked cover-up. They insisted that grief had driven the Carters to make irrational choices, not malice. Public opinion was divided. Some believed the parents had coldly plotted their daughter's death, while others thought they had made a terrible mistake in a moment of desperation. Regardless of perspective, one fact remained impossible to ignore. Lily had not been kidnapped by a stranger, but lost at the hands of those who should have protected her most fiercely. The jury deliberated for several days before returning with a verdict that would define the case forever. Both Emily and David Carter were found guilty of murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. When the sentence was read, there was silence in the courtroom. Emily buried her face in her hands, sobbing uncontrollably, while David sat expressionless, staring straight ahead. The community of Greenfield, once united in hope, was left to grapple with betrayal and grief. For them, the story of Lily Carter would never be forgotten, not because of the tragedy of her death alone, but because it revealed the terrifying truth that danger sometimes lives within the very walls of home.